What do you mean Sarah will take over the business? My voice was even, though my hands gripped tight beneath the table. The fancy light fixture over the eating area cast a soft brightness on the surface, but the air felt instantly frigid. My dad, Mr. Peterson, the man whose company I had rescued from collapsing, barely looked up from his food as he went on cutting his meat. Alice, let's be realistic, he sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a youngster. You're excellent with technical stuff, but leading, that's just not your strength. We require someone with authority, someone who earns respect. Your sister is the optimal choice. Sarah, sitting opposite me in her expensive outfit, took a drink of her wine with a small, smug look. She hadn't lifted a finger to help when Peterson Holdings was deep in debt, but now, with the company making record profits, she was being handed everything on a silver platter. I created the software that rescued this company. My voice was sharper now, cutting through the gentle sound of plates and forks. Without it, you wouldn't even possess a business to pass down. Dad chuckled as if my comment was amusing. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and tossed a crumpled bill onto the table. For your effort. I stared at the $40 bill resting between my plate and my untouched wine glass. $40? For the years I had dedicated working late into the night, coding until my eyes burned? For the countless sleepless weeks I'd spent analyzing financial losses, designing a system that would not only pull us out of financial disaster, but propel us to the forefront of the sector? $40? For the creative work that had transformed Peterson Holdings from a failing relic into a $350 million powerhouse? Mom shifted awkwardly in her seat, casting a glance my way, but she stayed silent. Nobody spoke. I looked at my father, the man I had admired growing up, the man I had strived my whole life to impress, and in that moment I understood something. It was never about ability. It was never about hard work or achievement or even fidelity. It was about dominance. I see. My voice came out quieter than I had planned. I picked up the $40 bill, turned it over in my fingers, and then calmly folded it into my napkin. Then I stood. Alice, don't make a scene, Dad scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. I smiled. I'm not making a scene. I'm simply excusing myself. Clearly, my function in this family is nothing more than a minor character, so I'll remove myself from the picture. Sarah let out a soft chuckle, barely hiding her enjoyment. Alice, Mom started, but I was already heading out of the eating area, my shoes clicking against the marble Minnesota floor. I didn't slam the exit. I didn't shout or demand justice. I just departed. The next morning, I got to the workplace early, just like usual. The building felt different over the past 15 months. Just over a year ago, the mood had been oppressive. Staff members whispering about job cuts, department heads leaving before the business could collapse. Now it was thriving. My software had revolutionized the supply chain industry, automating tasks that used to take weeks into just a few moments. We had expanded globally, securing agreements with major clients. But today, something felt off. As I walked through the entry area, I noticed a few nervous glances exchanged between employees. Conversations quieted when I passed. I reached my office, only to find the entry already open. Inside, my workspace had been cleared out. My computer was gone. The sign that had once read, Alice Miller, Chief Technology Officer, was missing. Sitting in my chair, casually looking through some papers, was Sarah. She glanced up with a bright, fake smile. Oh, good morning, Alice. Didn't Dad inform you? I'll be moving into this workspace. You'll be answering to me from now on. I felt my stomach sink, but my face didn't change. What's my role? My voice was steady. Sarah tilted her head as if thinking it over. Then she shrugged. We'll figure something out. Perhaps something in user support. User support? In my own company? In the company I had saved? She smirked. Dad suggested you take some time off, actually. Relax, maybe work on some personal projects. But don't worry, you'll still be connected to the company in some way. I took a slow breath, my heart pounding in my ears. They wanted me out. After everything I had contributed, after every sacrifice, every late evening, every answer I had developed to keep this company alive, they were dismissing me like an afterthought, like I was worth only $40. I stared at my sister, Then at the company emblem on the glass walls outside my office, Peterson Holdings. A name that once stood for family, loyalty, and history. Now, it only represented deceit. But I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I simply nodded. Understood. Then I turned and walked out. They thought they had prevailed. They thought I would disappear quietly. They had no clue what was going to happen next. I walked out of the office with my head held high, my pulse rate normal. They believed they had finished me off. They thought I would vanish, accept whatever leftovers they tossed my way, maybe even beg to remain. But as I stepped into the lift and the doors closed, a single idea burned in my mind. Just watch me. The initial step I took was to become invisible. Not literally. I still appeared at the office the next morning, still sat at the tiny desk they had assigned me in the furthest corner of the building, surrounded by new hires who didn't yet know who I was. But I didn't fight back. I didn't complain. I observed. And in under a week, I saw precisely what was occurring. Sarah was completely overwhelmed. She had no idea how to manage a company, let alone one that had just grown into a multi-million-dollar business. She spent her hours in endless discussions, making choices based on feelings instead of actual information. She dismissed department leaders who tried to advise her, replacing them with her acquaintances, individuals whose only qualification was knowing which beverage paired best with certain foods. The company wasn't merely exposed. It was nearing collapse again, and I had constructed everything they were now wrecking. That's when I made my resolve. If they didn't want me at Peterson Holdings, I would build something greater. Late one evening, long after most employees had departed, I sat in a coffee shop across from three of the most intelligent, most skilled individuals I had ever collaborated with. Mark, our former finance chief, the man who had balanced the ledgers when the company was struggling financially, who knew every financial trick like the back of his hand. Olivia, the top data specialist in the field. She had practically created our customer profiling system from scratch. Sam, our head engineer, the only person who understood my software as well as I did, because we had programmed most of it together at 3 a.m., surviving on caffeine in sheer desperation. All three had quietly resigned within the past month. They weren't foolish. They had recognized the inevitable signs. Alice, Mark leaned forward, his expression serious. What's the strategy here? I looked at them, then pulled out a document holder. Inside was everything I had been developing in secrecy. We're creating something new, I said simply. I didn't need to convince them. They were in. There was one detail Sarah and my father had failed to notice. The software. Yes, it was under Peterson Holdings' name. Yes, they legally held the rights to it. But I had written the original programming code long before I ever incorporated it into the company. In the most recent version, the one with the most advanced features, I had never uploaded it to their servers. It was still mine. I spent the next month working quietly, enhancing it, improving it, making it more powerful faster. Then I presented it. Not to Peterson Holdings. To their rivals. Within 4 weeks, I had 3 offers. By the close of the month, I had a contract, a $55 million agreement. And just like that, I wasn't merely competing with Peterson Holdings. I was about to devastate them. The initial indication of difficulty for my father's company arrived subtly. A client that had been faithful to Peterson Holdings for over a decade abruptly withdrew their contract. Then another. And another. Sarah panicked. She began demanding answers, dismissing staff randomly, blaming everyone but herself. But the truth was straightforward. The market had evolved. The next generation of software, the one I had perfected, was now powering their competitor systems. Peterson Holdings was suddenly obsolete. And I was only beginning. The key moment arrived 8 months later. I sat at a luxurious hotel banquet hall, sipping bubbly as the main speaker concluded their address. This was the tech leaders event, one of the biggest industry gatherings of the year. Every significant CEO, investor, and senior executive was present. And this year, I was the special guest. As my name was announced, I rose and walked onto the platform, my heels clicking against the polished ground. Tonight, we acknowledge the innovators driving the sector forward, the host announced. Alice Miller, the creator of the most revolutionary supply chain software available today, has transformed how global corporations operate. Her company, Zenith Innovations, is now valued at over $550 million. The applause was thunderous, but as I gazed out at the crowd, my eyes met a recognizable face. My father, seated at the back next to Sarah. Their company was again on the brink of financial ruin, and they both knew it. I smiled. Not out of bitterness, not out of vengeance, but because I had finally learned the lesson they had worked so hard to teach me. I didn't need their approval. I had succeeded on my own terms, and this time, there was nothing they could do to stop me. It had been exactly 15 months since that humiliating meal. 15 months since my father tossed a crumpled $40 bill onto the table and told me I wasn't capable enough. 15 months since my sister smirked at me, knowing she was being handed something she had never earned. 15 months since I walked away without a struggle, only to win the larger conflict. Now, as I sat at the head of the Zenith Innovations board table, reviewing our most recent quarterly figures, I could barely suppress a slight smile. Income, $340 million. Market share, 52% and increasing. Peterson Holdings? They were bleeding money. I had systematically dismantled every advantage they once possessed. Their clients had departed, their stock had plummeted, and their latest financial statement, leaked to the press just a week ago, confirmed the worst. They were close to collapsing. And that was when the predictable occurred. At precisely 11 a.m., my assistant signaled into my workspace. "Alice, your father and sister are here to see you." I leaned back in my seat, exhaling slowly. Good. It had finally come to this point. "Send them in." They entered like specters. Sarah's expensive attire couldn't hide the fatigue in her gaze. My father, always so controlled, always so certain of himself, looked older, defeated. They had lost, and they understood it. "Alice," my father started, his voice carefully controlled. "We need to discuss things." I gestured to the chairs in front of my desk. They hesitated, likely because they could sense that for the first time in their lives, they were stepping into my territory. But they sat. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, her fingernails tapping against the chair armrest. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad sighed. "Look, we've had our disagreements. But ultimately, we're family. Peterson Holdings is facing difficulties. We require your assistance." There it was. I let the quiet linger, watching them squirm. Finally, I spoke. "And exactly what are you asking me to do?" Dad leaned forward. "We're prepared to offer you a leadership position, something significant. I recognize now that we may have underestimated you." I tilted my head. "You recognize it now?" Sarah finally looked up, her expression strained. "Alice, don't be difficult. We need you, all right?" I laughed. Actually laughed aloud. "You need me," I repeated. "That's amusing because just over a year ago, you told me I wasn't leadership material. You told me I was only capable of technical tasks." Dad had the audacity to look annoyed. "You understand how business operates. Decisions were made. But now we must progress. If you return, we can rebuild Peterson Holdings together." There was again power. They didn't desire me. They wanted to control me. "And what role are you proposing?" I asked, pretending to be curious. Dad straightened his shoulders as if preparing to finalize the arrangement. "You'd be second in command, right below Sarah." I blinked. And then I laughed again, louder this time. Sarah flushed. "Alice, grow up. You developed some software, fine. But that doesn't mean you understand how to manage a company at our scale." I stopped laughing. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the desk between us, and I made sure my voice was as cold as ice. "Sarah," I said softly, "my company is valued at $550 million. Yours is just weeks away from bankruptcy. Explain to me again which one of us doesn't know how to run a company at our scale." Silence. Pure, satisfying quiet. Dad cleared his throat. "Alice, please." It was that single word that did it. Please. The same man who had dismissed me, belittled me, thrown money in my face like I was an unimportant employee instead of his daughter, was now pleading. And I had never felt more at ease. "No," Sarah stiffened. "Excuse me." "No," I repeated. I don't need Peterson Holdings. You needed me, and you discarded me. You made your choice, and now you have to accept the outcome. Dad exhaled sharply, frustration creeping into his voice. You're seriously going to allow your own family's business to fail? I didn't cause anything to happen, I replied smoothly. You destroyed this company the moment you put Sarah in charge. Sarah pushed back from her chair, standing abruptly. Her face was red now. You're just resentful, she snapped. You've always been envious of me. I gave her a slow, amused smile. Envious, Sarah? I don't need to be envious. I already possess everything you desired. I stood as well, smoothing down my top. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a legitimate company to operate. My father left in angry silence. Sarah stormed out. But before she disappeared through the entries, she turned back. I hope you're content, Alice. I met her look completely calm. I am. She walked out without another sound. And as the entries closed behind her, I sat back down, exhaled, then I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I was finally at liberty. The moment the entries closed behind my father and sister, I allowed myself a long, slow sigh of relief. They thought they could walk in here, offer a few empty apologies, and expect me to rush back to fix their mess. They had no idea who I had become. But as much as I enjoyed watching them struggle, I knew this situation wasn't finished. Peterson Holdings was dying, and when a sinking vessel goes down, it pulls everything and everyone down with it. The question was, would I permit that to occur? The announcement came 5 days later. Peterson Holdings had declared failure publicly. It was everywhere. Business magazines, online discussions, even major newspaper headlines. Former industry giant Sterling Corporation crashes overnight. Poor management choices sink a $320 million business. How greed and family issues ruined Sterling Corporation. And the most ironic part? Every piece credited the company's earlier success to me. They all highlighted the obvious. The only explanation Sterling Corporation survived its initial near collapse was because of the program I had created. And once I was no longer there, its end was inevitable. I was in a meeting when my assistant, Sarah, knocked on the door of my workspace. Alice, you might want to take a look at this. She handed me a printed document. I quickly scanned it, a small grin playing on my lips as I reached the final section. Sterling Corporation was being sold off. Everything was going under the hammer. The main office building, the remaining items of value, even the Sterling name itself. Father was desperate. He had taken on too much debt for the company, borrowed money in a last-ditch effort to rescue it, and now the lenders were seizing everything. And I could buy it. The sense of justice was almost too perfect. That evening, as I sat in my high-rise residence looking out over the urban area, I considered what I truly desired. I had invested so much effort proving myself, so much energy battling against the people who had dismissed me, betrayed me, put me down, and now I had already triumphed. Did I truly need to crush them further? I recalled that night 18 months ago, when my father had thrown $60 onto the surface like it was a tip for a server, like I had no value. And just like that, my decision became perfectly clear. I made my move the following morning. I didn't involve an investment group. I didn't use someone else. I wanted them to know exactly who was taking everything away from them, so I personally contacted the legal representative handling Sterling's liquidation process. I wish to submit a direct offer for all Sterling Corporation assets, I stated, including the right to the name. The attorney paused. Miss Sterling, do you fully grasp the implications of that? I smiled. I understand completely. A week later, I was seated in the very same main conference room my father had once dominated like a ruler. Only this time, I was the one in control. The documents were laid out before me, a smooth black and gold writing tool resting on top of the final agreement. With a single signature, Sterling Corporation would belong to me. The enterprise my father had established, the one he refused to let me manage, was now mine. Brenda and father sat across from me, both of them looking drained and pale. Father looked like he had aged another 12 years in the past week. Brenda wouldn't even make eye contact. I still can't believe you are doing this, she murmured. I raised an eyebrow. Doing what? Purchasing a failing business? acquiring a brand that no longer holds any importance. She scowled. You understand what I mean. I leaned back in my seat, tapping my fingers against the smooth wooden surface of the table. Amusing. 18 months ago, you didn't think I was capable of operating a business. But now you're acting like I possess too much influence. Father exhaled sharply. Alice, just sign the darn paperwork. I picked up the writing tool, hesitated, and then I slid the documents back across the table. Father blinked. Brenda frowned. What is this? Father inquired. A different proposal, I said simply. He picked up the papers and quickly read the first page. His eyes widened. You are dissolving Sterling Corporation. Brenda gasped. You are shutting it down? I smiled. That's correct. My father looked like he might burst. Why would you even consider that? I leaned forward, my tone calm. Because I don't need Sterling Corporation. I never did. But I do desire one thing. I pointed to a single condition on the last page. Father followed my finger, and his breathing faltered. Brenda grabbed the document and read it out loud, her voice trembling. All remaining rights to the Sterling name, patents, and intellectual property will be absorbed by Apex Innovations and permanently retired. She looked up at me furious. You are not just buying it, you are wiping it out. I met her gaze steady. Yes. Sterling Corporation would never exist again. The name would never be restored. The business would never be brought back. It would simply disappear, exactly as they had tried to make me disappear. Father clenched his jaw. You are just doing this to get back at us, aren't you? No, I corrected. I am doing this because certain things deserve to cease to exist. I picked up the writing tool again. This time I signed. And just like that, it was complete. The Sterling era was finished. And in its place, Apex Innovations rose. With no competitors from my father's failed enterprise, we grew rapidly, securing exclusive agreements that once belonged to Sterling Corporation. Their history had been erased. Mine had only just started. 3 months later, I received a correspondence. No return address. Just a simple handwritten note inside. Alice, I do not expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you will understand. Father. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I tossed it into the fire. And as the flames consumed the final piece of Sterling Corporation, I smiled. Because I had finally, completely, and utterly prevailed. 3 months had passed since I removed Sterling Corporation from existence. 3 months since I signed that final paper ensuring the name would never return. 3 months since my father and sister departed that main conference room with nothing. And yet, for the first time since all this began, I felt a sense of calm. Apex Innovations was succeeding. With no competitors from Sterling Corporation, we had expanded aggressively, securing every major client that had once been my father's source of pride. Earnings: $550 million. Market influence: 65%. Status: undisputed industry leader. But numbers weren't what satisfied me the most. What satisfied me was walking through my workspace every morning and seeing a business built on merit, seeing staff who were there because of ability, not family connections, seeing a business that I had built without needing my family's approval. But as much as I wanted to move forward, the past had a strange way of lingering. Especially when I received the invitation. It arrived in a plain envelope, a simple cream-colored card with elegant gold lettering, the Sterling Family Annual Industry Event. I had completely forgotten about it. Every year, for as long as I could remember, my parents hosted the most exclusive gathering in the sector, back when they still held power. This year, my father wasn't hosting it. Someone else had taken over, someone who purchased their large residence at auction after the bankruptcy. The invitation was nothing more than a formality. No doubt whoever was running it now had no knowledge about the history between me and the Sterlings. It was accidental that I even got one. But instead of discarding it, I made a resolution. I was attending. Not to prove anything, not for vengeance, but to bring this story to a close once and for all. The evening of the event, I arrived in a sleek, custom-made black evening dress, stepping out of my car with the quiet assurance of a woman who had nothing left to demonstrate. The gathering was as lavish as I remembered. Sparkling light fixtures, refined music, and a sea of wealthy elite figures sipping bubbly as if they still governed the world. Except this time, I was the most influential person present, and they all recognized it. Whispers followed me as I made my way inside. Is that Alice Sterling? No, she manages Apex Innovations now. Didn't she destroy her father's business? I ignored them. I wasn't there for them. I was there for one purpose. And then I saw them, my father and sister. They were not the center of attention anymore. They were not surrounded by powerful executives discussing multi-million-dollar deals. Instead, they were off to the side, a pale imitation of their former selves. My father looked smaller than I recalled. His once imposing presence had diminished, replaced by something I had never witnessed in him before: remorse. Brenda, on the other hand, she still carried herself with pride, but I could see the flaws in her facade. The way her fingers gripped the base of her champagne glass, the way her eyes quickly glanced toward me, then away. For the first time in our lives, I was the one with influence, and they both knew it. I walked toward them, my footwear clicking against the gleaming floor. Brenda tensed up. My father turned, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not bitterness, just acceptance of defeat. Alice, he said, his tone softer than I had ever heard it. I tilted my head slightly. Father. A lengthy silence stretched between us. Then he sighed. I suppose this is the part where you boast. I smiled slightly. No, father. This is the part where I say farewell. Brenda blinked. What? I did not come here to rub this in your faces, I continued. I did not come to remind you of everything you lost, because honestly, that is not my concern any longer. I placed my drink down on a passing tray and met my father's eyes one final time. For years, I spent my life trying to earn your approval, trying to prove I was good enough. I exhaled slowly. But I don't require that anymore. I turned to Brenda. And I do not despise you. I never did. I just feel sorry for you. Her face became rigid. Because unlike you, I did not need to take power, I stated. I built my own. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I gave them both one last look. Then I walked away. Not out of anger, not out of payback, but because for the first time in my life, I was unburdened. I left the event without looking back, without the need to demonstrate anything, because this was never about revenge. This was about becoming the person I was meant to be. And as I stepped into my car, heading back to a business, a legacy, a future that was entirely my own, I smiled. Because this wasn't the conclusion of my story. It was just the commencement.